So, Nikki, why don't you just tell me a little bit about yourself?
Okay, I'm Nikki Massaro Kaufman. I have been working in the web since about 2002, and in education before that. You and I met, what is it, 8 years ago?
So
And
long ago.
a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. We met and have kept touch since then. And my job title changes constantly, partly through my own advocacy. But through all of it, we've attended conferences together. And a long time ago, we pitched this idea about self-advocacy.
hmm Yeah, and I was so excited when I saw your proposal. I was like, it's time. It's time for the idea to be made a reality because of anyone that I have ever met in education, in any industry, you are the person that has been able to create the position that you want. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about that.
You know, over the years, I've been able to uh, switch into departments where I felt I could be more effective, advocate for job title changes that reflect the work that I've been doing. I've been able to negotiate for flexibility, and I've been able to help other people along the way. And I think that's part of feeling empowered.
Absolutely. So, I mean, how do you get to a point where you can just go in and confidently ask for what you want? Because I find this is challenging for a lot of people. They don't think that they're worth asking for what they want.
I think that part of the reason it's a challenge is that some of us are wired to think that when we ask for things, we're being selfish or egotistical. And so I think that's where the being a mentor and being a muse part helps, is understanding how much of your own self advocacy is a benefit to other people. And sometimes it's also a way to make yourself feel empowered when you're feeling discouraged and when you feel you don't have any agency within your position or in your organization. Being able to do something for other people is the other part of that.
Oh, tell me a little bit more about that. So I mean, we're talking about advocating for yourself, right? So it does seem kind of like this inherently selfish thing, which I actually don't think that being selfish is necessarily a bad thing, but it's doing something for you, but you're positioning it as, this helps other people too. How does that work?
Well, part of it is, the more ability you have to do things within your own work, the more you can help other people get exposure and promote their ideas. And also part of it is, breaking the mold so that the next person can use you as a precedent. And
Okay.
so if you can flip that thinking around and stop feeling guilty about asking for things, um, it allows you the freedom to actually start advocating for yourself.
So one of the things that I find gets in the way of a lot of people doing this well is they have no idea what they want.
Yeah. And I think self-knowledge is a very, very important piece of it. And you do so much with that, with the DISC assessment. Um, One of the things that somebody once told me is if you want to know what you should do for your career, you need to know who you are, what you believe in. And if you know those two things, it doesn't matter what kind of skills and experiences you have, they can be earned. But you really can't change who you are, and you're not going to change your beliefs for your workplace. No job is worth your soul or changing your personality. And so you need to find out who you are before you can find what your place is.
Mhm. I love that you just said that. No job is worth changing your soul or your personality. And I find sometimes people are so scared to have the revelation that they might not be in the right job, that they might have to leave their job and go find a new one. Have you ever been in that position?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, I had taught for 5 years, and that's where the selling my soul idea came from, is that I felt that sometimes my best moments of teaching were the moments that I certainly didn't want my supervisor in to supervise. And I felt that when I was in and when they were in and I was trying to be evaluated, I felt I had to be an entirely different person than who I am. And that's about the time I figured out, well, this isn't what I want to be. This isn't who I want to be. No job is worth that. If
hmm
somebody said, I'm going to pay you $1 million to be somebody else, but you have to be somebody else all the time, I don't think it would be worth it.
No, that would be my very definition of a nightmare right there.
Yeah.
So how do you go from being in a job that isn't quite right for you to being in your ideal circumstance?
I think it's a process. Like part of it is the self-knowledge that we've talked about. Part of it is learning when to speak up for yourself. But I think some of it is coalition building. And like I said, the building up of other people is a very important part of being able to advocate for yourself. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of coaxing to get people to do what to do what they really wanted to do anyway. Sometimes I joke that my superpower is that I can get people to do what they wanted to do, but just needed somebody to give them permission. There are always people who are waiting for that invitation to actually present because they're never going to put themselves out there. So I like to give people opportunities to co-present. And sometimes it's that they have this hidden ability. And if you're promoting them, you're building that coalition, you are showing leadership. And I think that just builds on your successes and helps you learn that you're also somebody that needs to be cared for.
Yeah, there's research to say that the more you help others in your organization, you're so much more likely to get promoted. It's ridiculous. It's called support provision. People with high support provision are something like 60% more likely to get promoted within a year.
Oh, that is so awesome. Dropping knowledge bombs.
Oh, yeah.
It's really, I think that's really, really important for people. My sister used to joke with me and tell me, you're not the boss of anybody. Stop telling them what to do. And that's where the muse part came in is I said, no, I'm not the boss of people. I'm a muse.
Yeah.
And it's getting people out there and getting people to do things. And sometimes that helps your own agenda, because a lot of times the reason we feel uncomfortable in a place is not just that we don't have power, is that we see that other people don't have power. And if you're a very empathetic person, sometimes even if you're moderately okay in your job, you're miserable because you see how others around you are being treated. Mm-hmm. Or sometimes you're on the ground and you know an issue is really, really important. And most of the people around you also know. And so in promoting them, you're also promoting your ideas because they're their ideas too, because they're also close to the issue that management doesn't see.
Yeah, I think the sense of powerlessness that so many people feel in organizations is a huge, huge problem. And, I think you've probably seen me present on this topic and have seen me ask people, how can you give others their power back? Because at some point they had it taken away from them.
Right.
I saw this great keynote at the Work Human conference last year where the Gary Hamel got up and he said, how many of you can pick out your own office chair? That's a $200 decision right there. And most people can't even make that in their organization. So how much of their additional power has been stripped away from them because of all this red tape? How do you expect them to perform in that environment?
Right. And when you think about it, there are more of us on the ground actually than there are of the people who are taking the decisions away from us. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We outnumber them and we know how to do the work. They can't do it without us. And right. So you need enough of us saying the same things. Mm-hmm. And that's where your coalition's important.
And if they hear it over and over and over again, it takes repeating something several times, right, for a person to even acknowledge that they've heard it. Mm-hmm. I love that you're talking about coalition building too, because other words for that are building alignment or getting buy-in and things like that. And it's one of the most often overlooked things that people do. Even when they do manage people, you still need to get their buy-in for something. I was working with someone this week who I was actually working with a manager and their direct report, and they're having a little bit of a interpersonal conflict because the manager's made a decision that the direct report really doesn't like and is almost at the point of quitting over. And I'm working with the manager. I'm like, look, you can make whatever decision you want, but you've got to get her buy into it.
Yeah.
And you can get people to buy into things they don't agree with.
Yeah. I have worked in organizations where management says one thing, but everybody knows that's not really what happens on the ground. because somebody decided on the ground that they have no buy-in for it. And so it just sort of gets forgotten or ignored.
Yeah. I think the idea of giving permission is really interesting too. I find when I work with people in helping them figuring out where they want to go with their careers, no one has given them permission to actually think about that. And this idea that now someone has said to them, come up with what you want your ideal job description to be. Come on, like make a plan about what you want your ideal day to look like. All of a sudden they have permission to do it. And then they go and they achieve it. And some of them achieve it quick.
Right.
But no one ever gave them that permission.
It's funny you should say that, because one of the things I noticed when I was teaching, and maybe even before that, when I was a college student working in food service, is that some of the best students out there, when they get into the workplace, they have been trained through school to sort of follow a path and wait for instructions, wait for directions. Don't speak unless your hand is raised. Don't do a thing unless we've told you to do it. And I remember one time working on a salad bar in college, and when everything was dead, people would just stand around and they would wait to be asked, to go sweep. They didn't even think to, it's not busy, sweep a floor. And those were the people who were the better students in school. And it makes you think, we've all been raised to follow directions, when what we need are workers who feel that they can do things out of the box.
Such a good point. Oh my God, I never even put that together before. I think that's an amazing point, though. And what I think a lot of people don't realize is that people who get themselves into leadership positions, they may exude this confidence, like they have all the answers, but they don't have all the answers.
No.
And a lot of them are pretty desperate to have someone come in and say, this is what we need to do. Do you find that?
Yeah. And I think that also sometimes what they need is when people can actually feel comfortable enough having a dialogue with them, saying, well, this is what you say you want. Is this a bigger priority than this thing? Or in getting this, we're going to lose this. Are you on board with that? But a lot of times people don't want to have those conversations with management, and they take something that they say very literally and not as yes, this is an important thing to me, but we can't forget about these other two things.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just in a conversation last week where there was something that was going to be a lot more work and affect the student experience, because they didn't want to use a certain word with management that would be the real fix, because management a long time ago said, we don't want to do this thing. And I said, so basically we're doing everything for a single word. We are placing extra work on our staff and on our students, all because we don't want to say a certain word to management.
Right. How crazy is that?
Yeah.
What's the worst that can happen if you say that word?
Yeah.
Nikki, one of the things that I think frequently comes up when people are thinking about getting that ideal job is negotiating. Mm-hmm. Right. And you are like the master of negotiating every single thing that you can negotiate to frame that job the way you want. What are some things that people need to know about negotiating?
I think that one of the things is that it is tied to out of the box thinking. Sometimes when we think about negotiating, we're only thinking about the salary number, and really negotiating can be so much more than that, because not all of us are in it for the money. And, I'm in high ed, so I'm not in it for the money at all. But maybe there are things that you can negotiate for because you want to have more impact in your job. Or maybe you just want to wear work slippers. And I do have a pair of tasteful work slippers. Because at the end of the day, if all it takes to make me happy is to be able to pick out my own damn chair and have a nice pair of slippers, or a little bit of flexibility in my work schedule, isn't that much better than, having a turnover rate or hiring somebody who doesn't know what I know?
Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it's just about asking for it.
Yeah.
People are so afraid what will happen if they ask for it.
Yeah. And you got to get used to being told no.
Right.
Yeah, and that shouldn't stop you from asking again.
Yeah, and you should almost plan to be told no, right? Yeah. Because if you go in thinking, I'm going to ask for it, they're going to give me immediately whatever I want, that's not realistic either.
No.
They're going to play the game.
Sometimes you can keep asking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there are times where, I might have been told, no, we're not going in this direction for something. And when something happens that directly relates to my original argument, I will stop and say, and this is why we should do X.
Mm-hmm.
Because you need to constantly remind. And that's the thing that you said about repetition, is that sometimes people need to hear it multiple times.
Yeah. And sometimes people just need to think about it.
Yeah.
Where their default responses could be, no, that's changed. That's scary. That's different than what we've been doing before. But then you give them like a couple of days to think about it. And then you go in and you make it even seem like it's their idea.
Sure. And sometimes my supervisor always would say, sometimes you need to let people make that mistake, even just a little bit, so that you can convince them, because they're not going to be convinced until they make the initial mistake.
Oh yeah, that practical learning is so important. I tell people this all the time, like find ways for people to fail with little or no consequence, and they will learn that lesson for the rest of their career.
Yeah, fail softly. And we need, sometimes it's hard to accept if they don't take what you say to heart the first time, but if you can allow people to fail softly and then revisit a thing and say, this is still a thing. And sometimes that fail softly allows more people to see what you saw and more people saying it. And I have had experiences where people tell me about my own idea, because the coalition was built either because the idea failed or because other people on the ground started understanding it, and I started socializing the idea with other people.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, when that happens, they actually get pissed. They get angry, like, this is my idea. Why is this person telling me about my idea? Like, that's a win if someone's telling you about your idea, right?
Yeah. If everybody's quoting you, is that a bad thing?
Right. And that brings us up to like detachment, which is so important to do in the workplace, detaching your ego from the end result. It's all about getting that end result. And if you have to allow someone else to think something is their idea, isn't that worth it if you get what you want?
Oh yeah. My grandfather was an industrial engineer in the pattern industry, and when people stopped making their own clothes, he took an early retirement in the 80s. So I kind of grew up with him dropping his own truth bombs on me. And one of the things he would always say is, if I wanted to see how to make change and how to improve something, I went to the workers because they know their job. And he's like, but if I wanted to sell the improvements to the bosses, I let them think it was their idea.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Every day of the week. Yeah. Nikki, is there anything you want people specifically to know about your session at Mental Health Day?
Oh boy, that's like a really loaded question. I think that the three things, the being an advocate, being a muse, and being a mentor, all work interchangeably. And building up the one, you're building up the other.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
So it's like a cycle, not a vicious cycle. It's just
it's just a regular cycle. It's like a permanent press cycle.
Is it an like an anti-catch-22 or a reverse catch-22? What do you call those things? But anyway, it is something that just improves upon itself, because you're coming at it from all of these different angles.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's all just part of the process.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, I am so excited about your session. Like I said, as soon as I saw it come in, I was like, done and done. Nikki has to be a part of this.
And I am glad about the whole event. I think it's got a great lineup. I can't wait to sit on some of these other sessions.
Cool. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Nikki is going to be joining 15 other amazing speakers for Mental Health Day on May 26, 2017. Head over to mentalhealthdayonline.com to get your tickets now.